Good morning, everybody. I hope you're doing well this morning. I'm going to be teaching 3 courses here this year, one in the fall, winter, and spring. It's going to be out of sequence. Normally, Imperial China comes first, but in this series, it's going to come last. This fall, I'm going to be teaching a course on Nationalist China, the story of a failed regime. I entitled it When a Dream Became a Nightmare. Many of you will remember Nationalist China, the China of Chiang Kai-shek and Soong Mei-ling. Failed regimes figure very prominently in American history because Americans have allied themselves with failed regimes. The other notable example is with the Shah of Iran in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. This 6-week course will cover a number of topics. The first lecture will be contextualizing the nationalist era, putting it into historical perspective, highlighting the issues, the personalities, and the relationship with the United States. The second lecture, the Nationalist Period in versus the historical narrative. The Nationalist period is a very brief period of time from the 1920s through 1949 when the Nationalists were forced to flee the mainland to Taiwan. In that very short period of about 2.5 decades, a lot was crammed into that period of time. It kind of reminds me of our history during the 60s and early 70s, the assassination of President Kennedy, the assassination of Robert Kennedy, the assassination of Martin Luther King, and the Chicago riots, and the Civil Rights Movement and the Vietnam War protests. So a lot was jammed into a short period of time. And this is the case of Nationalist China. The third lecture is the Nationalist Perspective. The Nationalist Perspective is the perspective of the Nationalist Party, the leading party. It was a fascist regime, a dictatorship, and the politics, the personalities of the leadership figure very prominently, especially the alliance with the underworld in Shanghai and the Shanghai capitalists. The fourth week will be alternative factions and opposition political parties. There was oppositions within the Nationalist Party, just as we see today in the Republican Party, the Trumpers, the anti-Trumpers, the mainstream Republicans, and the conservatives. In the Nationalist Party, there were people who opposed Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalist leadership. But the most notable opposition came from the Chinese Communist Party, the rise of Chairman Mao. And we'll talk about these opposition and alternative point of view. In week 5, we're going to cover Nationalist China and the calculus of war. Here we see the nationalist Chinese regime fighting first a civil war with the Chinese communists in the 1920s, and then a war with Japan in the 1930s and 40s, and then another civil war with the communists in the late 40s, between 45 and 49. So it's a miracle that the nationalist regime survived fighting 3 wars in succession. And finally, the last lecture is entitled History's White Paper on Nationalist China, Judging the Success and Failure of a Failed Regime. I hope you'll come and join me. And then in the winter, we'll be talking about the history of Communist China and the political economy of the People's Republic of China, and in the spring, Imperial China. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.